Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Rob Nelson. This is Rob Nelson Live, our Wednesday show. Wow. The police department in Seattle is being defunded. The black police chief in Seattle quits because it's being defunded. 100 people are arrested and 13 cops injured in mayhem in Chicago. And the black mayor goes off on the protesters. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, the top cop of California and of San Francisco, is now the vice president for the Democrats. All that while the Pac-10, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten have, for the first time in like 100+ years, canceled their football seasons. And Sturgis is happening. What an upside down world we live in today. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there.
My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News, but news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
All right, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. Going to keep it a little shorter tonight. Got a really fun show coming up on Friday with a fascinating TV and radio personality, Kent Emmons. It's going to be great. It's going to be a really cool discussion. So 5 o'clock, change the time, 5 o'clock Pacific time on Friday. It's going to be fun. I want everybody to get in on it. But let's jump into today. Let's just kind of buzz through some of the new stuff that's going on. It has been a heck of a week. Bruce, you there?
Hey, Rob.
Figured I'd say hi to you early, right? Because it's just been a crazy week.
Hectic, crazy.
And I feel like it's COVID technology week again. Every so often I have these COVID weeks where all my technology just goes south. I did a thing on this guy's show that came on Friday, Bullet Point Nation. They had tech problems. I had tech problems. I mean, you never have tech problems. You fix them when you have them. But man, I swear it's the COVID virus is affecting my technology.
It's because we're so much more dependent and reliant on it now that we're all doing tech from home, which for me is like a godsend, right? Everyone needs me, everyone wants me, everyone calls me. That's cool. But for everyone else, it's like a complete culture shock. They didn't need to depend on it before.
Right.
So now...
Yeah, no, you're the man now. Remember last week they joked about you being tossed in the garbage can when you were a teenager? You were never tossed in the garbage can, were you, Bruce?
No, I lived in the gym. I had to. I was a little kid, so I was short and scrawny, so... You know, after one summer, I just blew up, and
I want you to bring back the muscle top look. All right. Well, so we'll join back up again in a little bit. And anybody who wants to, we're streaming on a lot of platforms, right? So if people want to jump in on this, they can. I already got a couple texts from some people who are having problems with their links and stuff. I don't know. Maybe they're having COVID technology issues too. But you can certainly text us or weigh in on the platform, and we love the feedback. Reddit, Instagram. Are we on TikTok today? No.
Not today, but ViewStub, Reddit, Instagram, Twitch, Facebook, Periscope, Twitter. I think almost all of them except TikTok. Yeah.
All right. Whatever. All my TikTok followers don't watch this show. They do, I don't know, millions of views, but they don't watch this. Okay, let me jump into the monologue. We'll keep it a little shorter tonight. So everybody, here's the deal. In Seattle, the Carmen Best, the black police chief, quits as the Seattle City Council essentially passes and has the votes to override a mayoral veto to cut their police department in half, the massive defund the police movement. Now, Seattle had a history of some problems with the police. I mean, most big cities do, but Seattle's was so bad that they had a consent decree with the federal government, which oddly enough, the mayor now of Seattle was the person who oversaw the consent decree. And the consent decree was a federal initiative with the city in which they had to change their training tactics. They had to deal with teaching their officers de-escalation. They had to have more community involvement. They were having all kinds of problems with police being too brutal, acting too aggressively, too many people getting hurt, etc. This was a couple years ago. So that consent decree now is actually in jeopardy. It's kind of an irony because the defunding will put that decree in jeopardy. But here's the weird thing. You've got a black chief of police, and I believe a black deputy chief of police in Seattle, Both, but the chief of police, Carmen Best, 30-year veteran on the force, resigning and saying, basically, what are you doing? You've lost all respect for this police department. This police department cares about this city. We care about keeping the citizens safe. We care about doing a better job. And when you defund us, you are putting a proposition out to people, which is to say, less police officers means safer streets. And she's like, that's a totally unproven proposition. And if you think about it, it is. It's actually not even a logical one. I mean, I'm not a fan of, I've said many times my issues with police authority and the abuse of that authority. And I'm the first to say, I don't believe the police should just be able to tell you to do whatever they want. And you just have to comply like they're, some kind of Gestapo. They tell you to jump, you jump. And if you don't like it, you can sue them. I've never bought that because I feel like, no, because they have guns and badges and they need to know their limits. They need to know that they're allowed to enforce the law and they do a challenging and at times very risky job, but they don't have the right to just abuse their authority with whites, blacks, Asians. I don't care who you are. And I've seen it done too many times to all kinds of people, including white people. Police and badges and guns, they just feel like, I'm in charge. You do what I say. You do what I say or else. I'm not lying. When I was in I might have told this story before. I'll tell you real quick. When I was living in the East Coast, I went into a 7-Eleven in my shorts and tennis shoes and socks from running in the heat in Virginia. And I tried to get a Gatorade, and the store security guy was like, "You're not wearing a shirt. You got to leave." And I was like, "Come on, I'm just going to buy this Gatorade. I'm dying out here." He's like, "Get out." I was like, "Okay." And I hand my Gatorade to the guy in line behind me. I'm like, "Will you buy this for me? I'll pay you." He's like, "Sure." And I walk out, and the security guy is just being a real jerk. And as I walk by him under my breath, I call him an a-hole. Well, that's not the best thing. I'm not proud of the fact that I did that, but he was being a real jerk to me. Nonetheless, he's an off-duty cop. He arrests me, handcuffs me to the counter, literally handcuffs me in my shorts to the counter, and calls for backup. I'm not lying. Calls for backup. Two squad cars show up. Get this guy who's handcuffed in his shorts to a counter in a 7-Eleven for calling the officer an a-hole, which again, not the best thing to do. And they have under color of laws at Virginia at the time. So you weren't technically legally allowed to call an officer, swear at an officer. Those times have changed. Anyway, long story short, whole thing ended up being crazy. I was on my way to law school. I get charged. I have to supposedly fly back for a case. The DA gets involved, and I get to know the DA on the phone who knows I'm going to law school. Kind of feels bad for me, but at the same time, I was like, well, you shouldn't have done it, but you kind of got screwed. And long story short, we work out a deal while I'm on the road working in a ranch in Wyoming, and basically I paid to a charity, and he dropped the case. The point is, I never should have been charged with anything. I certainly shouldn't have been handcuffed to a counter, but that cop didn't like that I'd kind of gone in his face, and that's what people do. So, do I think there's excessive police brutality and excessive police force? Yes, yes, yes. But does getting rid of cops just wipe them out? You think you're going to be safer? So Carmen Best, the chief of police of Seattle, is like, you're not going to be safer, and I'm not going to run this department if that's what you're going to do. And FYI, the majority of new hires are minorities in the Seattle police force, and they're the first to go because seniority in the union still exists. So when you cut half the police force, you don't cut the old white racist guys. The racist part I just threw in to get people wound up. You cut the last in. So she even says you're going to be firing all these African-American and minority police officers who you want on the force. It's the dumbest idea ever, but the city's going to do it. Seattle's going to turn into a mess. Meanwhile, in Chicago, 100 people arrested in a protest that breaks out. Like a dozen cops go to the hospital, shots being fired everywhere after the cops shoot a guy who shot at them first. And they didn't kill him. They shot him, and he's in the hospital. Riots break out. And the mayor and the police chief of Chicago, both also black, come out and say, enough. This is not free expression. This is absolute, utter criminal conduct. They're finally starting to acknowledge it and say it. Peaceful protests are one thing, and even protests that sometimes turn violent, it happens. But this is just all-out lawlessness. Chicago's just been on fire. Murders, gunshots, people since the hospital, record numbers of homicides, of gun incidents, of people being victims of gun, not always fatalities, but of gunshots being shot. Crime just taking off. But yeah, get rid of police. That'll solve the problem. It's like literally, what part of like making reform doesn't mean you literally throw everything out? It's such a such a naive way to look at it and such a reactionary way. But we live in reactionary times. I think that's the simple truth. And so you're going to see what happens. And meanwhile, FYI, remember Portland, when once they were really angry because Trump sent in the Gestapo. Well, those federal officers are no longer the FBI or whoever they were. And maybe they're inside the courthouse, but they're long gone. And the protests continue night after night after night. And finally, the Portland police and mayor are getting fed up with it and kind of like, enough. Like, stop being violent. And yet take away the police. That'll solve the problem. Okay, moving on. I'm going to keep this ticking along. Yeah, Kamala Harris, the new VP pick. She was the obvious choice if you think about it. She's the one that sort of had the least baggage and could motivate people the most. She'd already run for president. And here's the thing. I think some level they know she might be president. We all do. Come on. At some level, you kind of know she's when have we ever had an election where you're literally looking, and even the people who support the candidate are kind of talking about how it's very possible that the candidate Biden doesn't make it through his term. And people are still going to vote for him. Never before would that have been okay. Like the candidate would be trying to insist they're fine. They're going to be fine. And people would be, how dare you suggest they wouldn't last through their term? But literally people are like, yeah, she might be president. We really need to be prepared for that. She very well could assume the presidency. And yet people still can elect them. So you're kind of electing Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who we don't even know anymore what Joe Biden is. But that said, what an interesting thing for the Democrats and how deep the hatred of all things Trump is, because Joe Biden is the architect of the 1994 crime bill. I keep saying that. People go look up the 1994 crime bill if you don't know what I'm talking about. Like the worst thing that happened to Black Americans when it comes to crime in 30 years. And it's what they have to now try to undo. And Kamala Harris was the top cop in San Francisco and the attorney general in California. And she's no liberal on crime. Now, if you're a conservative, you might think that's a good thing. But I mean, literally, she fought to uphold wrongful convictions where they'd been accused of witness tampering, of evidence manipulation, of false tests, all kinds of stuff. And she fought to uphold those. She fought to uphold the death penalty, and she said, my views don't count. She stayed off ballots, saying her office couldn't get involved. She literally was so not known as being a progressive, reform-minded district attorney or attorney general, and yet she is on the ticket. Just because she's Black, so what? So what? If you want to change, if you want criminal justice reform, the color of the person you bring in doesn't determine it. Their views, beliefs, and history of what they did do. Kamala Harris is nothing close to a reformer. The opposite when it comes to criminal justice. She can say whatever she wants. Look at her record. Same with Joe Biden. Nobody cares. They're like, who cares? No. It's like literally we've become the Instagram. It's the Instagram presidency. What we put up, what we post, that's the image you should remember, not what we really are. So when people post their best lives, meanwhile, they're like suicidal. It's like that. It's the image that matters, not the substance. Forget about Joe Biden's record. Forget about Kamala Harris's record. They're going to be awesome for progressives. Actually, a number of progressives, Bernie progressives and some leading progressive writers and stuff have come out and said, what a joke. This in the midst of a movement to like change around racial inequality, around criminal justice reform, to pick Biden, the author of the 94 crime bill, and to pick Kamala Harris, who was the top cop and not a reformer in San Francisco, is a joke. And yet they will. And they'll go forward. And this point in time, it's anybody's bet who wins the election. So if you're out there a betting person, first of all, don't believe anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen on either side. I always used to say I kind of know. I used to say, I can pick. And I picked Trump. I picked Trump the day he came down the escalator. I picked him to win the nomination, and it'd be a strong shot against Hillary. And people pick presidencies and elections, and people are kind of good at it. It's like picking sports stuff. This one you can't pick. Anything could happen. It doesn't matter what the polls tell you. I mean, everything's so upside down. Right now, you might look and say Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are shoo-in. Everybody hates Trump. Well, not everybody, but it would seem that way. He's sliding in the polls. He's not handling the pandemic well. I don't know if anybody could, but he definitely isn't. It's a mess. It's been all politicized. It's not going away. And he, of course, promised it would go away. So that's on him. And it hasn't. And you could say they win. But you can't say they win. You really can't. First of all, anything can happen in politics in 90 days. Secondly, never count Trump out. The media will keep telling you he's out, he's out, he's out, he's out, he's done. Who knows? Who knows what vote gets suppressed the most? I mean, a lot of people might not go to the polls on either side. You just don't know. Not to mention, whoever wins, there's going to be litigation for weeks, if not months, claiming there were irregularities. Either side. They're going to say Trump will do it. Trust me. If Trump wins, the Democrats will do it. They'll all be suing the heck out of each other, saying you haven't officially won the election. Anything could happen. And anybody who says otherwise is lying, or they're just full of it. Nobody knows at this point. And that's why it's a strange, odd, upside down time. I mean, again, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, keep calling the Pac-10, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten not playing football. I mean, Michigan, Ohio State, that game's been going on for 100 years, over that. But I mean, these guys have played, I think, every time. These big rivalry matchups, like 100 plus years. Nothing stopped them. And they're actually not going to play. I mean, if that tells you anything, whether it's the right move, the wrong move, it's the state of mind of this country. It tells you something when the most historic college rivalries that have existed for like half the length of our nation stop playing because of the virus. And honestly, I don't think that's a political thing. I think that's a culture thing at this point. People are so on edge, so scared, so unsure what to think, believe, do. They don't want to go to games. The schools don't want the liabilities. Probably a lot of players don't want to play. Some I'm sure do. We're already playing pro sports in bubbles. But hey, no big game. I mean, it's crazy. My whole lifetime, everybody in live's whole lifetime, they've been doing it, and they're not doing it. And if that doesn't tell you something about kind of the cultural upending of America and where we're at because of this pandemic, I don't know what will. And the scary thing is this pandemic ain't going away. Again, we can call it a pandemic, not call it a pandemic. The reality is, and I said it from way back in the beginning, before I was doing this show, when I was doing just a podcast, they're lying to us. If they think if you are quarantining a healthy population with a couple thousand cases, which is when California first pulled the trigger, nationwide, a couple thousand cases, you are going to have that problem whenever you unquarantine that healthy population. Unless you have a vaccine or herd immunity, you are going to have the same problem you had when you had 3,000 cases. Only now you'll have way more than 3,000 cases because people will still keep getting it. So now you'll have thousands of cases and cases that are asymptomatic and you won't even know. And all those cases, of course, you're going to start an uptick in people getting the disease. It's inevitable. It was always inevitable. They all lied or else they're absolute idiots. I don't know which. If I knew it, if they were medical experts weren't telling them, guys, we're quarantining a healthy population because there's a few thousand cases out there and a highly infectious disease. Those few thousand cases won't go away. There'll always be a few thousand cases. There may not be a million. There'll always be a few thousand. When you let everybody out, those few thousand cases will start spreading again. Plus, it's asymptomatic population will spread it. So inevitably, you let a population out without herd immunity, they're going to get sick and the numbers are going to go up. But they made everybody think just another month, a couple months, and people kind of bought the BS. Wait a couple more months and we'll go back to normal. We'll have sports and movies and all kinds of great stuff in just a few months, everybody. Just ride it out. Do your patriotic duty for a couple months. That was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. What offends me is they knew it was a lie. They're not that stupid. They didn't really think that if they let everybody back out, when the entire healthy population had been quarantined, there was no herd immunity to a highly infectious disease, that people weren't going to start getting it all over again. And then it became political, attacking the states that opened up first and trying to point out how bad they are, as if somehow they shouldn't have opened up, as if, like, again, 60,000 small businesses have closed between like mid-March and beginning of March and end of July. 60,000. And that's just the ones we know of. And that's just the beginning, because so many managed to hold on through a couple months, but they can't hold on for a few more months. Small businesses employ almost half of America's workforce. They're like 44% of economic activity. You start losing 100,000 small businesses, that's like losing more than 100,000 actual lives to a disease, which, by the way, as much as nobody likes to say it, the reality is, and I'm not saying this because I'm being like a jerk about it, Of the deaths, the vast majority, the vast majority are over 70, 75, over 80. Almost half, 40% are in nursing homes. That's not okay. That's not good. But your mostly active, younger, healthier, productive population is not accounting for even close, even a big chunk of the deaths, a tiny, tiny fraction. And that's why you can't keep people from ultimately going back to their lives. It just doesn't work. Sooner or later, people, you can't just keep waiting for the dream vaccine, which 30% of Americans say they won't take anyway. And people are like, well, that's too bad. Then fine for them. No, because then they'll spread it to other people. Vaccines aren't just a miracle cure, but everybody's clinging to it. Masks and vaccines, and we'll be fine. At some level, we're going to have to get comfortable with this thing, go back to our lives and trust. People are afraid to look at you. In Los Angeles, you walk into the store, people stare at you. I went horseback riding, and somebody literally ran up the trail in mountains above, in California. There's like mountainous ranges. You think you're in the Old West, high up, hundreds of feet up on these 15-foot wide dirt trails for horses and runners. Nobody else. And some guy comes running up with no shirt on, with his mask on. You are in the middle of the mountains running by yourself. Are you afraid that if another human being passes within 10 feet of you on a mountain trail, it's going to blow off the sky and land on your head? I mean, people are literally, that's how scared they are. I mean, glared at me for not having a mask. I'm like, I'm 7 feet up on a horse. I'm not around people. But people are that scared, and they've made us that scared. I'm not saying it's not a real disease. It's a very real disease. It's a very infectious disease. It's a very scary disease in many ways because we don't know a lot about it. But it's not going to wipe us all off the map. So we're not going to go back to normal for a long time because our psyches have been damaged. And you don't get much news on the suicides and you're getting little on the massive increases in drug overdoses and in alcoholism and in domestic abuse and in child abuse and in spousal abuse and in suicides. And you do hear that like half the country claims they're dealing with depression. And we're only at the beginning of the economic chaos of this. All bets are off when it comes to who's winning. Okay, final thing. Yeah, Sturgis. 250,000 people driving into a motorcycle rally. And the news, of course, was Smash Mouth. Remember Smash Mouth? I'm Gen X. Smash Mouth was like this hip band, and we were the Gen Xers. Smash Mouth driving in, coming in at a concert, and the lead singer basically says, F this Corona shit. And it's all over the news. And, of course, the stories clearly point out that, people are there, not wearing masks. They're all gathered. Okay, first of all, I'm not defending the not wearing mask things. I'm sick of people say I'm not an anti-masker. I wear a mask. It's whether I think it's always going to help or not. I still wear one when I'm in places, And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it if it's nothing more than being kind to your neighbor who feels more comfortable with it on. That said, I want to point out that they did a study on at Yale or somewhere with masks, and they pretty sophisticated with lasers and taking photos so they could actually see where the droplets went compared to if you're not wearing a mask. And what they found was, so they could watch the droplets and the particles, test you before the mask, and they put all the different masks on, tried all different masks. The only mask that really worked was the N95, really effective. Other masks were somewhat effective, more like typical hospital type masks that people wear when they're in the OR, that kind of thing. But what they found didn't work was bandanas, knit masks, and neck gaiters. If you look, like most people, tons of people wear those neck gaiters and the bandanas. And what they found was they're actually not only not very effective, they're less effective than not wearing a mask. Literally less effective. They said, we don't know why, but for some reason, the nature of the mask spreads the particles out so they get smaller and spread more. So when you're wearing that neck gaiter, you're actually spreading the disease more than if you weren't wearing it at all. You would never know that. Bruce, can we real quick show that clip from the rally? This is a rally when I was at the biggest BLM rally. And it's this young woman chanting all Black Lives Matter. And I'm showing it to you, not so much for what she says, although it's really fun. She's real tiny and she's just so loud. It's crazy. But look at all the people around her.
The march is moving, thousands of people. If I fall into this mess, I'm falling into a mosh pit of people, but it's intense. What do you got to say, everybody? What do you got to say, huh? Yeah. Do you notice there are no police here? And there is no violence. It's peaceful, right? Black Lives Matter today? Black Lives Matter! 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 Now we got a song going, everybody.
Okay, a couple quick things out of that. One, I want to note the joy and the exuberance in that. Whether you're for it or against it, whether you felt it, we focus on the violence that happened at protests. But to me, again, that's like always just focusing on the brutality that happens when police officers do something wrong. The majority of protesters for BLM weren't out there. Now that's different. When we're talking about what happened in Chicago and what's happening in Portland, weren't out there trying to be violent. They were out there trying to, whether they were right or wrong, whether their ideology was misguided or not, whether they're being fed something false, whether it's going to make a difference, they were out there with a purpose and a joy and a passion for that purpose and an enthusiasm. There's nothing wrong with it. We should celebrate it. That's kind of what makes America cool, is that we can do that. You can go out and protest and they don't shoot you down in the streets, despite the fact that people say when the police show up and use tear gas, it's like literally, to be honest, Americans protesting get way farther than anybody else in the world. Like police do try to retain some order, but they're not by and large. You'll hear the story. Police use tear gas. It's like, come on. In most countries, they shoot you, they gun you down, they lock you up. We have a freedom to say what we want in America, which is awesome. And I loved watching that young black woman out there, so tiny, bellowing it out, all Black Lives Matter, full of like fire. And also to show you the whole thing with race, like, it wasn't a race thing. I could be standing there and be like, you're tiny, but you have a big voice. She's like, thank you. Big smile on her face. Like, it wasn't all angry. But my other point in that is, if you look at that picture, first of all, she and tons of people around her aren't wearing masks. Next, most of them that are wearing bandanas or those neck gaiters. They're beyond not social distancing. They're sardining. I mean, you couldn't get that close to people on a beach if you wanted to. They're on top of each other. Half masked, half not masked, half of them wearing masks that don't do anything, screaming. So you want to talk about sending spit everywhere, screaming, sending spit everywhere. That's a tiny pocket of hundreds of people packed into one little area. It was thousands, but where I am around me there, in one city, in one protest, that happened over days and days and weeks of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of protests in hundreds of cities. But that didn't spread the virus. Maybe it contributed a little. Going to the beach did. People going back to work did. And that's the problem. And people at Sturgis will. And that's, as I've said, the problem, the hypocrisy of it. I've said masks matter, absolutely. And if social distancing matters, which it does, then you got to practice it. And you don't get a pass on that just because you're protesting, unless the disease isn't really going to wipe the population out, which it isn't. So I'm okay with people protesting. I'm okay with people going to the beach. I'm okay with them going to Sturgis. I wish they'd social distance and wear masks, but they don't at protests. But the hypocrisy of the one over the other is why we've turned this into such a political mayhem. And God help us if Joe Biden wins and suddenly it's okay, the pandemic's over and we can do what we want. I don't think that's what'll happen. I think they kind of like the control. Final point on this. Generationally, we all look at our parents' generation as kind of stuck behind us, stuck in the mud. So I'm a Gen Xer, some generation before me, the baby boomers. And we looked at our parents as like they were like so afraid of everything and so uptight and so controlling, right? Well, Smash Mouth was Gen X. And they were part of the the 90s scene of music and, of like the grunge rock and people like breaking out, and I saw into a political group and a movement. We were all like, boom, and our parents' generation was like they're stuck in the mud. And they felt they were progressive compared to their parents' generation. Well, now, the next generation, the millennials and Gen Z, are looking back at the Gen Xers, who are the parent generation, and doing the same thing. Looking at our generation as like, what's wrong with you people? All stuck in your mud with your old ways of thinking, your old ideas, even about race, about gender. The word feminism, like nobody under 25, 30 uses the word feminism anymore. They might talk about women's rights and women's power and women versus men, but they don't feminism. It's like, what's that word? Same with African American. It's like black people, not African. I'm technically African, blacks, whites, women, men. But now young people are doing the same thing, going, you know what? We're not as afraid of this as you are. And it's not because we're selfish and idiotic and don't care. We think we're going to be fine and we want to live our lives. Young and old, they're really old, they're doing it too. There's a lesson to be learned. And something funny about the fact that every generation kind of looks at its generation before it. It's like, you're all stuck in the mud. What's wrong with you? We're going to be free. We're liberating. We're doing different. And then they grow up and get old and stodgy. Maybe we need to stay young. Maybe just need to start thinking and looking at what young people think and do and say, whether we agree with it or not. And we go, maybe they're onto something. Maybe they are how life keeps going and gets better. Okay, that's a long rant monologue. I went too long, Bruce. I couldn't help it. I got wound up.
It happens. It happens. What do you
Did I get you wound up, Bruce?
There were certain points, like I kind of wanted to say things about, like, for example, Corona. It's a good possibility that it's going to get better before it gets worse during the next 4 months of 2020. That's
better before it gets worse, or worse before it gets better?
I'm going to say it's going to get better before it gets worse. A perfect example. In the next month or two, things are going to be calm a little bit, with the exception of the bubonic plague making a comeback. Come Christmas time, things are going to get worse. There's going to be a lot more money issues, a lot more companies that are going out of business. And then I feel like at the turn of 2021, and this is point number 2, we'll probably have some more available testing for, like, inoculations, antiviruses, and that will start to turn the tide, I feel like, February, March, April of next year.
You sound like a medical expert. Like you should be on CNN or Fox News, Bruce.
Don't do that. Don't give me a big head.
That mainstream media stuff is crap. I'm sorry. All of them. I just want to say all the mainstream media, left, right, all of them, they're all so canned. They're all so conventional in how they do stuff. They're also everybody in a box, and we get our little guests on. We have our town halls, and everything's so structured. And, even it's like left, right, and with the two views, and, the politically correct view here and the politically correct view here on either side, both sides. It's so lacks authenticity or real voices. And I know we're trying to get out there and do that. We're going to be doing some stuff in Jacksonville in the next couple of weeks and try to get into starting getting into some communities and just talking to people and getting real voices, because you hear different things when you talk to real people on the streets on all sides. You literally don't, until you see this side or that side, you see an honest perspective that isn't clouded by that prepackaged, click-led approach to news.
Right. I get sick of what you hear, or sometimes you see these YouTube videos and you see nothing but the same reporters repeating the same rhetoric. And it's like, oh my gosh, really? This is what we've come to, and this is who we go to for our news? It's just bullshit. And I'm kind of like being tired of being manipulated. So
yeah, and I think a lot of people are. It's the new media. All right, look, we're going to wrap up in a little bit. We got our most regular fan of the show. We're gonna have to make a club, like for like full Nelson, Rob Nelson live. Best recurring callers, and we're gonna try to figure out how to get more callers in. I know people have problems with the links sometimes and stuff, but Bruce is working on that. Maybe we're gonna have a call-in function at some point soon where you can actually just call and you don't have to be on the screen with a feed. You can call in, just your circle will pop up. Jim, thanks for joining us from Florida.
Yeah, man. How you doing, Rob?
I'm great.
So I'll make it quick, just because I know you're trying to make a short show here. So I'm no business expert, but I'm looking over here. I got a monitor on my right.
I know. I see you looking off at something because you're not looking at us.
On January 31st of this year, the stock market was at 28,256. The stock market today is literally less than 300 points lower than the market was 6 and 7 months ago. That's crazy. I mean, I'm no business guy, but last time I looked around, this wasn't the same world, the same economy as it was 6 or 7 months ago. So I'd love, just personally, to have you get some guy on here that's smarter than you and I, that's telling us what the hell does Wall Street, know that we don't. Because when you made your
point is that the economy, that the market should be lower than that, given everything.
My God, I mean, how can we possibly think? I mean, the oil industry's upside down, the airline industry, the cruise ship industry. I mean, every major, the real estate market. I mean, the commercial real estate market is literally teetering, right?
So so you can get someone smarter than me, and maybe you can find that person for me who's a business person. I'd love to have them on. But my guess, Jim, is, is the fundamentals of the economy aren't operating the way they normally would, because what's happening isn't actually a fundamental thing to the economy. Like typically, you see when a recession's happening, there's underlying foundational elements that cause it to happen, right? So this was an external force that caused, like a meteorite hit the thing. And that the foundational the foundations never were rocked. So my guess is people are looking, going, why are housing prices going up? People are looking, going, this isn't a sign that our economy's fundamentally got problems. It's that we got hit by something, we shut everything down, and we'll open it back up and it'll come back to life. But I don't know, everything's upside down. So, and I know we are going to have foundational problems, right? Because you can only take so much loss before it does start to actually affect your foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to have lived through several of the business, cycles, the severe business cycles, and I don't know if this is that literally the guys at Wall Street are smarter than us, or if this is another exuberance, 2000, 5, 6, and 7, where in hindsight, everyone looked back and said, what the hell were we thinking? It's like everyone with half a brain knew that we couldn't continue, the way it was. Interest rates were, crazy. Cap rates were too low. And then it crashes. All of a sudden, everyone finds God, afterwards. I could be wrong.
Jim, go find that bit. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I'm going to say my comments as a small business guy. I love your thoughts earlier about where the real damage is coming to our country. I think I put everyone sort of 3 categories. You got sort of the service workers who, it's horrible. They lose your job. You're making 10, 12, 14 bucks an hour. Those jobs went away really quick. They're coming back real quick. And for the most part, the vast majority of those people, they had their employment, they had their $600 a week, they had a long paid vacation. And then at the high end, you got your corporate people, your executives. Very, very few of those people have lost their jobs as of today. And then you've got the real, bread and butter of our economy, the small business guy, which we're surrounded with. We have a small business, and we look around every day. And I just, I'm beyond sad. I mean, this isn't a job. Like, people wait, they invest their whole life, they save their entire life. They do everything right. And when a small business goes under, he doesn't just get another small business, right?
Right. It's not like a big company declaring bankruptcy. No, it's a real problem, and it's something we got to really look at. Jim, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it, as always. We'll get more callers. We get more people on this. We had a comment on the screen I was going to try to get to. It's so sad. Here it is. It's from Reddit. The sad thing that the age of enlightenment is coming past so early on. I'm not sure what you exactly mean by that. It's certainly a poetic kind of sentiment. Meaning, by the age of enlightenment, are you saying the age for young people, or that we were actually heading in an enlightened way and it went away? I'm not sure if you're looking long term, 20, 30, 40 years, or you're saying for young people. So if you want to clarify that, we'll pick that thought up. But it's certainly a very kind of poetic thing. And if nothing else, it's certainly true that the age of innocence for a lot of people is good. This is not something that we just come out of. I mean, we'll get over it and we'll rebound and all that, but we are having fundamental cultural, social changes, that a societal shift. And it's not just because of the Black Lives Matter, or the racism protests, or this or that. It's way more than that. It's something far more deep and unsettling about humanity and society and the way we're treating each other. We're not treating each other better right now in the midst of this pandemic. For the most part, we're actually worse. It's sad. You'd think we'd be getting better. Violence is on the rise. It's kind of, I don't want to leave on a sad note, but it's the reason there's a lot of people committing suicide, and in fact, Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the Yankees, or the Giants, or the New York Giants, and the big Hollywood producer's 30-year-old daughter committed suicide this past week. And, again, someone who had on service would appear to have it all. Daughter, heiress of a billionaire. I think he's a billionaire. He's close. And, a good life, great education, great family. But, her dad said, Steve Tisch said something in a post that I thought was really provocative and really profound. He said, today our daughter, like so many others, lost her fight with a horrible disease of depression. I'm paraphrasing. And I think we need to realize that, it's depression is a disease, and it's a fight for people to fight it. It's like she quit and gave up and killed herself. She lost her battle. The way someone loses a battle with cancer, it's like she couldn't fight any harder. And a lot of people feeling that way right now. And if you are, you need to hang on. I've been there. I get there. You need to hang on. And if you know anybody, literally, we need to just be a little more loving to each other right now. It actually would make a difference, right, Bruce? Wouldn't that help if we're all just a little more loving, Crafty?
That's how I try to live my life. I mean, people have no idea how much I give. I mean, some of you probably remember that I went around and bought groceries just for friends that I hadn't seen in 10, 15 years. And when COVID first hit and everything started to get locked down, I went and drove to families and I just dropped food off, like just hundreds and hundreds of
That's
dollars.
nice of you, Bruce.
Well, someone
That's
has
really
to.
nice of you.
Otherwise, I mean, sometimes you can't depend
Serious.
on.
I'm serious. I'm giving you the applause from the audience.
You can't depend on the
generous.
government.
More people need to do that.
But nobody
More
does. They
people
don't
need
think
to do
about it.
that.
They just think about themselves. They're just obsessed with looking out for themselves. And I'm like, well, some people like myself, I'm just fortunate where I could be in the position where I could help and assist and take care of other people. Even if you are today, I don't see other people trying to help out. They'd rather be keyboard warriors instead of actually, doing something, spending your money, go out and helping other people.
That's a great way to. It's a great way to put it, Bruce. Keyboard warriors. Look at, I got you wound up at the end. I got you ranting at the end. But you know what? Keyboard warrioring, it's like posting black squares on Instagram. Go make change. Go be about change. Do something. Be kind to someone. Do a good deed to somebody. Help someone out. Make a difference. Bruce is right. Keyboard warrioring's easy. We're already closeted away enough. And listen to people who don't agree with you and have some compassion. We're all trying to figure our way through this. We don't have to all agree. We can see it radically differently. Any and all of it. You can still have compassion and tolerance for other people's views. Thank you guys for watching. Check us out Friday. We're going to have a great show. My guest is going to be Kent Emmons, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.